Good morning. Welcome to this workshop. My name is Jean-Luc Clemens. I'm the Director General of IDATE. It's a pleasure to be at the FTTH Council Conference. I mean, we're a bit home here. IDATE has been publishing the panorama that you may have seen, the FTTH Council panorama, for the last, I think, 18 years, if I'm correct. So being able here to share with you our perspective is always a great honor. Today, we're going to do three things together with my colleague Roland Montagne from IDATE and Benoit from Plum. First, we will come back to the panorama, giving you some additional insight on top of what you may have heard during the workshop session and during the plenary session from yesterday. Then Benoit will address this issue about the last 10% in FTTH rollout, which is a key issue in many countries. And then I will conclude with some perspective from IDATE on ARPU. ARPU in the fixed network, in FTTH, maybe trying to bust some myths and bringing back some good news for the FTTH industry.
If I can correct you, Jean-Luc, I'm going to be talking about take-up, not the last.
Take-up, sorry. And of course, since it's not too many of us, we'll be able to take some questions. So. First of all, I'll let Roland introduce his panorama. Thank you, Roland.
Thank you, Jean-Luc, for your kind introduction. So it's a true pleasure for me to sum up what we present 2 days ago. It's an update of the market panorama for fiber deployment in Europe. We're covering here 39 countries in Europe. The first headline is that when you see the 3 different platforms delivering very high speed broadband access technology in Europe, in the last 10 years, you see the blue progressing. The blue is representing FTTH. So the part of FTTH in the very high speed platform is really progressing by nearly 20 points. When you see especially cable decreasing from 10 years ago to now. So there is a true shift from those technology to fiber in Europe. This year is also a record one because when you look at the growth in terms of homes passed this year and in terms of subscribers, the growth has multiplied by 2 compared to 1 year ago. So this is really a solid growth appearing in Europe this year. Nevertheless, there is one challenge, and it will be here the subject of this panel. If fiber coverage is steadily increasing, there is a gap also increasing between penetration and take-up of fiber. You see that the gap between the blue and red curve has really increased. So this is the difference between coverage and take-up. So this is a true challenge today, and there is a different reason for that. We will go more in the detail. First is the competition with copper in certain countries still in Europe. The example of Germany, for example, or the UK. Also, competition with DOCSIS here in the Netherlands. It's a good reason explaining the slow of the take-up. So, the take-up is the ratio subscribers compared to homes passed. And the penetration is the ratio subscribers on total homes in the country. That's the main difference. When we compare this fiber penetration from Europe to the other economies worldwide, Well, you see that Europe is not really in good position. It's only the US with 29% that below Europe. Other zones of the world, of course, there is the champion with UAE, but even China is very high, Japan, the pioneer, or even Brazil is presenting a higher take-up rate than Europe. So this is really a key point of our continent. If we go more into detail in terms of coverage in Europe, we have more or less 3 zones where what we call the leading regions. We have the Nordics with countries such as Iceland or also Norway, for example. We have the eastern part of Europe, a country like Romania is representing more than 94%. And we have the south of Europe, with economies that have decided to go with fiber in the early days. This is the case of Portugal and Spain and also France. Nevertheless, the one progressing fast are the new countries of fiber. UK break a record again this year with plus 4.2 million homes passed being built in the country in only 1 year, followed with Germany and Italy. So you see, for example, for Italy, 64 in terms of coverage, and when you see at the take-up of Italy, it's only 18%. So here, it's the main focus. We have to take action, maybe in Europe, is this challenge of low adoption. There is the same, some champion. France and the south of Europe are doing quite well. But you see, of course, the new country of fiber like Germany is presenting only 11%, and other parts of Europe are also very low in terms of penetration rate. But we'll go a little bit more in the details. There is still space for growth in Europe. You have here the difference between the homes already passed and the homes left to be passed. There is in the EU27 nearly 20 million homes that have been built this year, but there is still a potential, not negligible, 74 million homes left to be passed in EU27 plus UK, and these homes left to be passed are concentrated in 4 countries, Germany, UK, Italy, and Poland, representing more or less 50 million homes to be passed. So this was basically what I wanted to share with you to set up the scene a little bit for my colleagues' presentation. We will have after time for questions.
Maybe we can take questions.
Oh, yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. My name is Yves Blondel of T-Rex. I'm a regulatory affairs consultant. The notion of home passed has been discussed many times. In your assessment, what is the level of coherence of the definition of homes passed between the EU countries? Are they similar, very different? If you're passing a home but you need to do another 400 meters, or if you're passing a home and you need to do another 10 meters, it's kind of really different. So do you have a view on that?
So the exact definition is done by the FCGA, the Association of FTTH Council worldwide. So you have the definition on the FCGA website. For us, home passed is when fiber is deployed in the vicinity of the homes. You know, so of course we try to compare apple and pears. So it has to be quite close of the homes. If, for example, if fiber is stopping at the street cabinet, it's not home passed for us. So it is done on the vicinity of a home. So we can, this is an average between 50 and 100 meters. It depends of the country. It's not exactly the same distance, but the philosophy is this one. But if you want to have the exact definition, please refer to the FCGA site.
Can I maybe add something to get to your question? This is also one of the reasons why the figures that are published by the FTTH Council are not always aligned with the national regulatory authority figures. That's a question that we get very, very often, because basically the definition taken at national level make it impossible to compare apple to apple. So one part of the job that we are doing is basically, one, to understand clearly what are the definitions behind used by the national authorities to getting in touch with them to try to see how we can estimate and adapt those figures if they are too different from a definition perspective from the FCGA definition. And at the end of the day, come up with an estimate where we kind of agree with usually with the national regulatory authority. So yes, there is a part of estimate, as Roland was rightly pointing, but we are really trying to do our best in order to make the figures comparable country to country. And usually we have green light from the national regulatory authorities, but I know, and Roland and myself, there is not a single month without getting questions from somebody somewhere in Europe that basically come up to us saying, hey, I don't understand your figures. There is a mismatch with the national figures.
Hi, it's Cem from Turknet, a Turkish fiber operator. Also on the data, I think deduplication of overlapping home passes is a big problem. And when I look at some of the countries and when you see the big gap between so-called coverage and penetration, sometimes the answer is just that, you know, the coverage is a bit misleading because maybe there are that many home passes, but they're all going to a third of the houses. They're all overlapping with each other. And I know myself because I'm in Turkey that this is the case. So we have here, you know, 90% fiber coverage in Turkey, apparently, but only 1/3 of subscriptions are fiber. And we have very little cable in Turkey. So, I mean, it's not easy, right, deduplicating. We know that our regulator doesn't deduplicate. So I don't know how you do it. It's quite difficult to do. But sometimes, so from country to country, the ability to deduplicate overlaps can be a challenge, it would seem to me.
Yeah, thanks for your question. Indeed, it is a challenge for us to identify really the overlap question. Nevertheless, we have in mind, of course, this phenomenon. So normally, in the countries, we have two KPIs. The one is optical socket deployed. So here it's only the sum of each homes being connected, being passed and defined by the players. So this is the overlap is here not taking into account. And then when we publish homes passed, is taking into account overlap. So normally with the coverage, the overlap is being taken into account. Of course, we have here a lot of discussion with the regulator of the country also. So it's always a ratio that we have to discuss with the players, and we will be happy to continue the discussion with you for the Turkish case, of course. Yeah.
So maybe we can move to Benoit, talking about an issue that Roland was rightly pointing the take-up challenge.
Absolutely. So, I mean, if you've been going around the panels like I have, every investor I've heard speaking mention take-up. And I think it is one of the key issues in where the industry is now. So I'm going to go through some thoughts about this, but I want to preface this by saying the following. There is no silver bullet. There is no magical solution to the take-up problem. It's hard work. And the only way that you get this addressed is hard work. And I'm saying this because I am getting the sense from both some operators and a lot of investors that they are looking for something that's going to solve this problem in 6 months. There is no solving of this in 6 months. Okay, so I'm not going to dwell too much on that, but again, using the most recent statistics that IDATE has produced, what we see is that roughly we have a third of fibered homes that are currently, a third of homes in Europe that are currently paying for fiber service. We have a little less than a third that could and are not, and then we have a little less than a third that don't have fiber connections today. That means that from a pure take-up point of view, if we ignore the future connections, there's 75 million homes in Europe that could pay for fiber service and are not. I choose to see this as a positive. This is an opportunity for growth, but it needs to be addressed properly. So why does this matter? Well, it matters because of course, you need to deploy. If you haven't deployed, there's no service to sell. But if your only focus is deployment, you're not generating revenue. Also, you're building an asset that is substitutable as long as it's not generating that revenue. In other words, just because I have deployed an area, if I don't have customers hooked to the network, someone else can come in and deploy, and it would be exactly as if I hadn't deployed. The only point where they have to ask themselves, is it worth going there, is if half of the market is gone already. So strategically and tactically, very important. The third aspect is, obviously, if you turn to your investors as a fiber company and you say, look at how good this business has been, it's going to be a lot easier to get funded for further deployment. If that's not working, that's going to be impossible. And finally, there's been a lot of talk about copper switch off at this conference, and it's an important topic. But I am a bit worried that, again, people are looking at policy to solve this. In my opinion, the only ones who can convincingly solve the take-up issue are the operators, and they need to do this by doing a right job. So that's what I'm going to be talking about now. Now, you will have noticed that our topic for this session is not take-up, it's monetization, because monetization is both how many people you have on the network and how much revenue they're generating. So Jean-Luc is going to address the ARPU issue, but I wanted to just mention that, of course, we can't look at both of these in separation. There is a symbiotic relationship between ARPU and take-up, and essentially the way that I see the approach is you cannot generate extra revenue from a customer if they're not on your network. So to me, take-up has to be historically your first step to making this a working financial proposition. Some of the early fiber deployments, especially when incumbents were doing them, were positioned at premium pricing because they were worried they were going to cannibalize their copper revenue base. And they ended up just not getting take-up because that's, in fact, the strategy that they had deliberately chosen. And now, 10 years on, they say, oh, we struggle with take-up. But that's not surprising. At the opposite end of the spectrum, we had operators, very aggressive, usually altnets, who would come in at aggressive prices with very kind of cheap and cheerful offers, and they got high take-up, but low ARPU. And so now they're struggling to find ways to increase their ARPU so that the revenue-generating machine is more effective. So we need to keep this in mind, that the two are really interrelated. Okay, so I choose to view this in terms of friction and incentives, right? Shifting from whatever solution you have today to fiber has a lot of inherent friction. And part of the friction is, an important part of the friction is, someone's going to come into your house and they're going to drill a hole in your wall to install equipment in your home. And that's immediately just there something that you have to be aware of and probably is one of the biggest hurdles to take up. If you don't internalize that, it makes it very difficult to address any of these problems. So any additional friction is going to make it even less likely that people are going to be subscribing. What do I mean by additional friction? If your subscription process is complicated, if they need to coordinate between several providers to disconnect from one to connect to the other, if your offerings are not clear, if your home installation process is sloppy, if the guy who shows up to drill that hole is weird, dodgy, they don't trust him, if your price is higher, if they can't figure out why you have 5 different offers and what the differences are between these offers, all of this is a level of additional friction that is likely to lead to the customer saying, you know what, I'll stay where I am. And if that happens, you've lost that game. So of course, you can overcome some of these elements of frictions with incentives, right? Your price can be aggressive. Your offers can deliver a significantly better performance than what they are currently getting. Your quality of service can be better. This is an important point because quite often operators mix performance and quality of service in their communication, right? But any of us who have switched from copper to fiber know that if the fiber plant has been properly deployed, our fiber service is way more stable. It doesn't have to be rebooted as often. The variabilities in speed are much more stable, all of this. And this needs to be articulated to the customer and often is not. And the last point, and I'm going to come back to that a number of times here, is I think a lot of the marketing people who are marketing fiber services have been through classic marketing training where you are told, it's drilled into your brain that you have to segment your offers because this is how you extract the maximum value from your customer base. When you're thinking about take-up, I think that is fundamentally wrong. The more you segment, the more confusing it is to the customer. And if the customer's decision is, do I go or do I not go, ideally you want them to be able to make that decision on the basis of a very clear single offer where the benefits are absolutely evident to him. The more you confuse that picture, the least likely this is to happen. So you want to reduce friction, you want to increase incentives. If the slide actually wants to increase incentive, it really doesn't want to. Okay, interesting. All right, there we go. All right, so to me, the fundamental consideration around take-up touches on marketing. Now, as you will see, it's a slightly expanded view of marketing, but still, it's marketing, right? So even though when I was in marketing school, we were taught that the 4 Ps was the be-all and end-all. I know there are other schemes today, but I'm an old guy. I'm just going to go with the 4 Ps. At least it's clear for everyone, right? So our 4 Ps, I don't know where I need to point. Oh, okay, there I need to point. So the product, you need a high-speed baseline. Why? Because the alternative is likely to be lower speed. If you're marketing your fiber at the same speed as your VDSL, you're not going to get take-up. I've been in these discussions with clients over the years. Should I launch 200 meg, 500 meg? My answer has always been the same. Launch a gig. The cost to you is the same. The appetite to your client is way higher. So don't worry about these definitions. Avoid excessive segmentation. I've talked about this already. The third point is a bit more subtle, and it's a new development, at least as far as I'm aware. And that is that there are now protocols that you can implement that really, really improve latency. And that potentially gives you another way of differentiating the product, especially since someone who has deployed a legacy platform, VDSL typically, are not going to make the effort of migrating all of that to a new technology. If you're deploying that on your fiber and it's forward-looking, it might make sense. I encourage you to look into L4S. It's really an interesting thing. All right, so price. Again, I talked about this already, but your entry-level price needs to be at the very least on par with XDSL cable. If you're asking the customer to pay in a 20% premium to get onto fiber, you're hampering yourself very significantly already. And again, too many price differences that the customer doesn't understand, customer is going to go, well, okay, well, I'll figure this out later. So promotion. The main promotion mechanism for fiber these days is onboarding promos. And they are important, right? So first year you pay half the price or whatever the promo may be. They are important, but they are not sufficient. The important thing is that operators often forget that this is a local market. And so they try to operate at a national scale on multi-local markets where the message just doesn't resonate. You need to be talking to the community and figure out ways of doing that. It's not easy. I said early on, this is hard work. It's not easy. It may be costly, but this is the only way that it is working. I'll just give you a reference point. Back in the early 2010s, the city of Nuenen in the Netherlands built a community fiber network. The city had one of the highest rates of retired people in the entire country. Their take-up was 70%. And that is because they were constantly talking to the community about the benefits. They were training people, they were interacting with important community functions, the church, the retirement homes. And all of this is an effort, but 70% take-up is a benefit. So it's really about putting these two things in perspective. And finally, I find the messaging of a lot of fiber offers confusing. You need, for take-up, to be very clear on your messaging. And placement, go-to-market. Now, this is maybe the most important and most challenging one, okay? You need local presence, one way or another. You need to leverage deployment. A lot of companies will deploy A, deploy B, deploy C, deploy D, deploy E, and then say, okay, let's market all of this. By the time you've deployed E, A doesn't remember the fiber is available to them. The best moment to interact with the client is the moment where you are there physically and you can knock on their door to say, we're deploying the fiber network. Would you be interested? Combining deployment and marketing is a key element of this. And finally, and this is something that I've seen in absolutely every successful projects that I have looked into, take-up begets take-up. If you can get very quickly to 10 or 20% penetration in an area, the guys who are subscribing to your network will talk about it, and you will see that the ramp up to what happens next is much easier. So the longer you wait after you've deployed, the harder this is to achieve. And it's really interesting when we work with clients on the history of their take-up, you will see that projects that were deployed 10 years ago, it took 5 years for them to get to 30% take-up. Projects that are deployed now, it takes 6 months. So it's very important to remember this. I clearly don't know how to do this. So, conclusions, focus on take-up from day one. When your take-up is low, avoid premium strategy, that's gonna harm you. Until retail brands, whether you're a wholesaler or retailer, until it makes sense to be doing above the line on a national level, you need local sales, you need local marketing. It is a key success factor. You need to make the decision as simple as possible for your customer. The offers must be simple, the segmentation must be limited, the benefits must be clear. And finally, you need to remember, and this is also something your investors need to remember, that the lifetime value of a customer who comes onto your platform, even if he's not generating a lot of margin on day one, is huge. The earlier you get him in, 6 months difference makes a huge difference to the business model. So this is, in summary, what I wanted to share, and hopefully it will open up to a lot of discussion and conversation. Thank you.
Any question for Benoit? Looks like it was crystal clear. Yeah, sorry. Where's the mic?
No, it's back there, I think.
Oh, thank you.
Hi, Benoit. Dean Bubley. So I'm primarily a mobile analyst, although I do fiber as well. And what strikes me is how different your presentation was to the ones I hear about monetizing 5G. And I'm wondering whether there are crossovers between the two sectors, the fixed and mobile here. You didn't mention, for example, business or enterprise, or B2B, and also the word API was absent. Are all of those mobile only, or are they applicable here as well?
So the API stuff is probably more for Jean-Luc to deal with because it's going to be an upsell opportunity in theory. I'm happy to participate in that conversation, but maybe we can push that to the next presentation. I think the fundamental difference is that with mobile, your customers are on the platform. The challenge is no longer to get them to subscribe when they are not subscribers. The challenge is to get them to upsell to a new service, or not upsell, actually, upsell or transition to a new service that you want them to be on. So to me, it's primarily, and I know you don't like the term ARPU, but I'm going to use it for simplicity's sake. It's primarily an ARPU consideration, right? The simile that I do see is that, especially in countries like Germany or Italy, where you have a relatively strong VDSL platform already, they struggle to see the benefit of the fiber platform. And that is a similar challenge to a 4G customer saying, well, what's the benefit for me with 5G?
I was thinking more in terms of like small businesses past, for example, and getting take up in retail. Small businesses past as well as homes past, getting take up in retail or offices or whatever happens to be also on the same street.
So in the fixed broadband world, the B2B market is, I think, quite a bit more separate than the residential market. And what that means is that essentially, cosmetically, you might have small business offers, but they're going to be residential offers with a few things tacked on, right? But you're not going to treat them any differently than you treat a residential customer. So I think by and large, the operators are not looking at small businesses as a separate market, especially not when they're deploying. They just treat them as residential. And then you have a more complex and higher value market with larger businesses who have genuinely different needs that they are willing to put money on the table to address. And these, in fact, you can, and sometimes you do, treat them as the same network entity as your residential network, but historically that was actually a physically separate network. So they are starting to merge, but they're not there yet.
Yeah, if I can just add something about API, I guess all large telecom operators are looking into API opportunities and how to monetize network APIs. I mean, that's not the purpose of the discussion today, but what is clear is that everybody is looking into that. Nobody has yet found the magic bullet. We at IDATE had exchanges around potential business model, regulatory issues around network APIs. We know that some operators have just given up this opportunity by just telling us, no, too complicated, regulation will not allow us, while some other are putting up project. The game is not closed yet on API.
Yves?
Sorry, coming back a second time, Benoit, with your slide of the 4P, which maybe you could put back up for the discussion. Okay, I know you're a sophisticated guy.
No, you can't.
I can't, but...
I know you're a sophisticated guy and you know your stuff, but doesn't that chart obscure the question whether the operator is vertically integrated, wholesale only, etc.?
It doesn't.
And
yeah.
how does a number of those points get treated if the network owner and the retailer is not the same? Because the rollout is done by one entity, the marketing by another, and or by multiple entities in many cases. So I think that needs a bit of elucidation.
No, you're absolutely correct. This was done for simplicity's sake. So in some sense, it's an end customer view, not a kind of functional view.
Can we get the mic back, please? Sorry.
And I was going to provoke you. Are you saying that vertical integration is good?
Well, I am not saying that any model is bad. That's for sure, right? I have been an advocate of open access for a long time, and I think there is a very good case to be made here. However, I will freely admit that the challenge of take-up for wholesale-only operators is a bit more complicated because they have no handle, or at least they think they have no handle on the relationship with the end customer. In practice, there are ways around this, or there are ways to address this, but they require a shift in mindset. A lot of these operators act as if they were regulated under SMP rules, and they internalize the notion that they should have zero connection to the customer apart from physically going there and pulling their fiber. When in actual fact, that may be something that applies to an incumbent that is regulated under SMP, but not necessarily to a lot of these smaller entities. And so let's take one example of a challenge, right? If you are deploying in low density areas, which is often the case with these wholesale only networks because state aid imposes that on them, what's going to happen is, in the best case scenario, your retail clients are going to be present for the first 3 months thinking, well, that's easy money, the gamers, the affluent people, they'll take the fiber. After that, their marketing will disappear because the additional effort required to get an additional customer, they cannot justify it in terms of investment of resources. And rather than do that, they're going to go to the next area that you open and market there for 3 months. So how do you address that? Well, one way to do that is to have a very different conversation with the retail service providers and to say, we can act as a sales channel to you because we are present locally. We can do this in a neutral way, and they need to really structure this so that that neutrality is put forward. But if we do win a client for you, we expect a payback because we have done your sales work for you. These models have been done in some areas, and they have been relatively successful, but I am not seeing wholesalers embrace this in, I think, the way that they should. The other issue is branding. Retail brands need to be recognizable by the end customer, or they need to offer something really, really good. If you don't have one of those, and ideally both of those, it's very hard to get customers to subscribe. As I often say, sadly, consumers are often more willing to keep going with a brand they know is shit than with a brand they don't know. And the reality is, if you think of it in terms of the risk they're taking, there's probably less risk going with a brand they don't know. But that's not how customers tend to think. So recognizable brands are important. If you don't have that, you need to be very aggressive. And again, I'm not seeing that combination happen, because if you desperately try to attract the big national operators and they're not necessarily willing to play, the alternative is you need to have someone who's going to be at half their price. And if you have that, maybe you get to 10, 15, 20%, and by then they go, shit, we need to do something about this, and they're going to come. So the dynamic is flipped over. But it's tricky, it's hard work, and I started by saying that, and I'm sticking to it. It is hard work.
Any other questions? Yeah, at the back.
Martin Wachutko, Breitband Oberösterreich, is an Austrian wholesale-only company. I need to disagree a bit. What do you say, Benoit?
Go.
Actually, it is pretty hard work. I fully subscribe to that. And I do see the responsibility for further increase of the take-up rate with the local company that is down to the ground. So it's the physical operator that needs to push there. Our learning is that the ISPs do not push anymore because they have several other markets, so they go there where it's easy. And if you go into a densification program, it's usually more than hard work. It's extremely hard work. So initial take-up is key. I fully subscribe to that. Everything you don't do in the first 6 months, you will not do in the next 6 years. So this... we have not that problem that you have shown there with 11% of take-up. We're around 50, so we're fine. But it is a hard way to get the 50 to 51.
So actually, I don't think we disagree, but yeah.
I think there was another question just at the back. Thank you.
Hi, it's Tom James, also a regulatory consultant specializing in price controls. The question I wanted to ask was about bundling. Now, yesterday, a number of speakers mentioned that bundling was key to take up, either bundling OTT TV packages such as Netflix and Amazon, or bundling fixed and mobile. And I'm thinking particularly of Spain, where there's a high level of fixed and mobile bundling and also a high level of take-up. And yet I didn't see anything on that in your slides, so I'd be interested in your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I mean, my kind of entry point to this is, incumbents or very large companies that are deploying fiber don't face the same challenges that the rest of the fiber operators do. So if I look at France or Spain, the take-up is high because they have fully integrated marketing engines, they market nationally. It's much more akin to a traditional broadband strategy, right? Smaller, more local players don't have either of these assets. They don't have a mobile network and they don't have a national brand. And that's why the challenge is higher, whether they're vertically integrated or wholesale. So on the bundling of content and stuff like this, I'd say the jury is still out. Again, if you're a Telefonica, that may be true. If you're a smaller player, I'm not sure it is. And I think being cheap and cheerful but delivering a kick-ass broadband service might be a more effective proposition, at least to get customers on board. Once they're on board, upselling opportunities may include, bundling options. When it comes to mobile, if the question is, should I be an MVNO to kick up my take-up? I think the answer is no, because the effort of doing that is probably not going to pay off. But it would probably require some much more in-depth number crunching to give a definitive answer on this one. I'm just a bit skeptical that that's a path they could follow.
Yeah, we'll come back to bundling. Yeah.
Just one additional comment on that, because I got the mic back. I know now where I disagree. There's no need to take the big operators on your network. So we thought firstly 8 years back that we need the big ones on our network, but later we figured out there's no need for them. So we do the 50% without them. So we quite recently got them on the network, so a few weeks back. So we have 8 years of experience without the big three in Austria, and it works fine. So there's no need for the big ones.
Thank you. Round of applause.
Sorry again, Jem from Turknet. We're a vertically integrated fiber ISP, but actually I slightly give a different perspective on that, which is that yesterday in this conference there was a session on investors, and basically all the investors at this conference are infra investors. And what we hear from the infra investors is we want predictability, no downside, discipline, and no surprises, basically. And then at the same session yesterday, they were all complaining, all these people, they're all engineers, they don't know how to sell, there's no take-up, they're not branding, they're not creating excitement. Why are these people so terrible, right? But actually, you get what you ask for, right? So you want predictable, you want infra, you want no risk, no surprise, no nothing. All the money is going into infra, right? Yep. Now, if you're a rural operator in Austria and there's absolutely no fiber around you, it's still a challenge, but maybe it's solvable. But when there's real competition and you have no branding and there's no money going to any retailers, and then the big guys don't come, well, who's going to sell, in 3-4 fiber networks? So the only markets where this really works is maybe like Spain, where there's enough players who are very strongly branded and who can both do infra competition and retail competition. Yeah. But not every market is like this. Many markets, there's only few branded big players, and then there's a bunch of people doing just infra. So if you don't have the market balance and you're a wholesale-only model, then if you're a monopolist, maybe in some areas, but otherwise, and there's no money flowing to anyone to actually build a brand and retail it and create this excitement that Benoit mentioned and do local activities, it becomes extremely difficult. So it seems like the structure, you have to look at both sides. If you want to be wholesale only, it's okay, but you need to look at who are the retailers and do they have money. And if you're really vertically integrated, you have to again look at the market structure. So it seems like you really have to understand the dynamics in the market rather than a kind of general answer.
I agree. I would add something to what you said about the investors, which is that they keep, well, I'm not going to use the word whining, but it did sound a bit like that in the last few days. They keep complaining about take-up being a problem. But they're not really doing anything to address that problem. And I think the core issue there is that they are looking for valuation. They're not looking for... in other words, I'm starting to doubt that there is a true long-term view with some of these investors. Some of them, it's fine, but others, I think the minute things started to go a little bit south to what they had planned, they're already thinking of exit. They're not thinking of fixing the problems. And so could investors help address the take-up issue? I think they could. One way that they could do that is that usually they have a number of properties across a number of different markets. Leveraging successes from one market to apply to another market is one way of looking at things that could work. I don't see them doing that at all. So yeah, it is an issue, and it is something that is really on my mind, because I've been talking about this for 10 years, and 10 years ago everyone was saying, oh no, the priority is land grab, we need to deploy, we'll figure out where the customers are later. And 10 years ago I was saying, I think you're making a mistake, now is the best time to sell. And of course, looking back, they're all now saying, yeah, we should have done that, but you know, it's a bit late.
All right. Let's move on. For my presentation, having heard all the things that have been discussed over the last couple of days, I thought it would be great to share some of the learning that IDATE gathered during some studies. And what we see is that from our fiber industry, there are actually a couple of good news, if not very good news. I know take-up is a challenge, but on the other hand, there are also excellent news. And I'll have the same problem as Benoit. Oh, voilà. We are entering a new generation of service, thanks to technology. I'm not going to go into the 400 and 800 giga on the backbone, but 10G PON is becoming a true fact on our networks. And attached to this XGS PON deployment, the home broadband bottleneck is being unbottled. We mentioned here FTTR. There was 2 days ago, there was a workshop on FTTR, but there are other solutions as well, Wi-Fi mesh. On my side, I kind of believe that FTTR is a very interesting solution. I'll come back to that. That being said, you're going to tell me, wonderful, it's a very good news for Nokia, it's a very good news for Huawei, but is it going to be a good news for me as an operator? You're going to ask me some additional capex with zero revenue. That's a story that I've heard with 5G operators. We were mentioning 5G. That being said, allez, voilà. That being said, first myth I would like to kill. In our industry, we keep saying, and we are from a demand perspective, and I'm sure you've heard it as well, data consumption is slowing down. On the mobile side, if you look at the Ericsson mobility report, for example, I guess most of you have seen, it may be true. Actually, the overall mobile data, according to ITU, is still growing, slower than it used to. Agree, slower than it used to, and then even in some areas, well, I know Orange told me the same thing. But from a fixed perspective, fixed keeps growing. Fixed data keeps growing at a very rapid pace, and we do not see it slowing down in the coming years. Because first of all, the pipe is there. Second, the applications are coming. 8K content, you name it. And I will not go, I mean, during the FTTR session that we made, one of the equipment manufacturer came with a lot of very nice services that would basically beef up the data consumption on fixed network. But the thing is, if, like me, you've been in this industry for like 25, oh, so kind of you, for the last 25 or 30 years, we all know that each time a bigger pipe was provided, there is some smart guy somewhere in the world that find a way to fill it up. right? So basically, what we are seeing is the deployment of those XGS-PON networks. It is clearly coming our way. And one other thing that we are seeing as well, and that's the good news, and that's very different from 5G, is that it creates an ARPU increase. So basically, what is creating an ARPU increase with the operators who are deploying XGS-PON does not come from Netflix. We mentioned the bundling of Netflix and Prime Video or whatever other service, you name it, where actually the money do not stay with the operator but flow down to some large US company. No, actually it remains with the operator. But how come? Well, it comes from something really unusual that is happening over the last couple of years in our history. It's a shift between fixed and mobile value. It's a shift. All those slides will be shared. It's a shift. When I started in the industry many years ago, mobile was the sexy business. Mobile was driving revenue. If you wanted to be cool, you had to work on the mobile business. Fixed was the legacy business. It did not create value. There is a total change over the last couple of years. If you look at the revenue breakdown in the EU 27, the change is obvious. And it comes from a change in the mobile ARPU. It comes from the change in the mobile ARPU because on one hand, the mobile networks, the mobile business has been extremely competitive. There is hardly a couple of countries where there is no price war on the mobile side. On the fixed side, there were price war when the unbundling of the local loop was launched at the beginning of this century. We saw the price declining. But the good thing is that when fiber started to be deployed, we saw first a slowdown of this price decline and even an increase. So what we see over the last 4 years is an increase net of inflation of the ARPU. This can be observed in most countries, France, Italy, Ireland, and many others. So the trend is not specific to one country. We can even see it with convergence. I will come back to the convergence point, but there was this question about convergence. Actually, what is totally counterintuitive about convergence is that it is actually increasing the ARPU as well. The first thing that would come to your mind is that when your client takes a convergent product, fixed and mobile convergent product, you make a discount, right? Well, actually, when you look at the ARPU of convergent clients, they are actually higher than the one of non-convergent clients. You can see that in countries where the convergence level are extremely high, like Spain, of course, or France. Coming back to Italy, the fixed broadband revenues are increasing, and the fixed ARPU are increasing. You can see it in all data, from the regulator to the operators. There is a shift. Same in France. And there is this premiumization around the fixed convergence, fixed mobile convergence. How do they do that? Actually, Benoit was saying, we do not need to create too many products, segments, price point. It's true. However, you need some. And what most operators, I think I have the, sorry, it's a busy slide. But what do we have to take out of this slide? Is that actually most operators on the fixed side have 3 price points. 3 price points. They have a low price point. We can say some kind of no frills, basic. They are, look at the offer from Free, for example. I used to work for Bouygues Telecom. Free was really the guys who gave us nightmares. More than nightmares, actually. But I mean, they are the typical maverick who really came and killed the market, first on the fixed side and then on the mobile. But look at what they're doing today. Today, if you look at Free, they still have their $29.99, which is their historical price. You know, the $29.99. It's a no-frill. They basically have the basics. They have a 1 gigabit per second access, the basic TV service, voice, fixed voice, and usually you can even have some promotional price at $19.99 for 12 months. That's the basic one. And then they have some middle of the road, the 2.5 gigabit per second for 40 euros. There you get a nicer box with more feature, a bit more bandwidth, some additional TV channels. And finally, they have their super nice box on the right-hand side, $59.99. And actually today, on the French market, the guy who used to be the maverick is actually the most expensive. Because if you look at Orange, their most expensive box is $57.99, while Free is $59.99. Even when I show this to French people, they have to look twice. Because it's so embedded in their brain that Free is always the less expensive, that they have to look twice. So basically, what do? They come with this 3 price point type of approach. And if you want the convergent, by the way, we were talking about the convergent. You want a convergent product, you want a 4P product, you don't get it on the entry price. You will only get it on the middle price. So basically a way for them to upsell when they have guys who are at the entry price is by making call out to them and saying, wow, by the way, you want a mobile line with a special price for 12 months, a 4P product, well then move to the middle price. You're basically thinking it does not work, right? Well, actually it works. It actually works. So basically we end up in a market where the fixed business and the fixed ARPU are increasing, the mobile are staggering, where the value comes from there. And so basically, coming back to the XGS-PON solution, you see the 8 gigabit per second. I mean, obviously, that's a promise. But when you are in an area where XGS-PON has been deployed, and there are more and more, you really get it. So basically, there are clients, and not only the nerdy like me, the guys who will always be willing to take the most advanced thing. No, I mean, there is massive adoption, up to 20% on the highest price point at some operators. So basically, selling a product with higher value, with higher speeds, creates value. And that is something that we see in Italy, that we see in Spain, that we see in France, where FTTH is quite well developed, where take-up is good. And that was totally counterintuitive. Because once again, when we do the parallel with the mobile industry, we saw that each time a new generation of mobile network was launched, it basically creates, let's be polite, very few added value, while here, it is working. Now, just a last comment about the home broadband part. We had this workshop about FTTR. We believe at IDATE that FTTR is also a wonderful tool for FTTH operator. I mean, obviously, there are other ways to unlock the home broadband bottleneck, which is an issue, by the way. You know that about half of the call made to call centers are about in-home connectivity. So basically, I'm in my room, I don't have a good bandwidth. Well, it's normal. It's because your box is actually in the entry of your flat and it's far away from your room. So there are plenty of solutions that have been deployed. I mean, Wi-Fi mesh is usually proposed by many operators, and there is this FTTR solution. We've seen FTTR being launched in the Asia-Pacific region, in the Gulf region. And for those of you who were at the FTTR workshop 2 days ago, they heard me telling the story. I was a few years ago at a large meeting organized by a large French operators who had asked me, what are the trends? Can you make a presentation, like a 10-minute presentation about the new technological trends, sorry. And I mentioned a couple of things, and then I came to this. And then there was this very cold reaction. You know, you make a presentation, and then you said, people going tense. And then I got a huge pullback from the participant, basically telling me, Jean-Luc, this is nonsense. This is absolutely total nonsense. We have already so much a hard time to make the final drop, to connect the fiber at the final customer. And now you are telling us that we need to go into the sleeping room, into the bathroom, into the living room, into the kitchen, and bring fiber there. Are you totally nuts? It will cost a huge amount of money, a huge effort, and it will bring back nothing in terms of value. And I can relate to that. Because at the time, this solution were, to make it simple, you could find it in Hong Kong, where Hong Kong Broadband Networks was proposing the solution to very, very affluent type of customer who were willing to pay $200 per month for their broadband access, which was totally unthinkable in Europe. That being said, those solutions have basically, there is a spectrum of business models that goes from value to volume. What do I mean by that? I mean, obviously, those fiber to the room solution, you can, like in Hong Kong or in Dubai, where it's deployed by Etisalat, you can have this pure value type of strategy, where you say, I'm proposing you this solution attached to my FTTH network, but then it's going to cost you a huge amount of money per month. It works in some countries. Maybe in Europe, less. We could, but it would only address a very small and very narrow segment. Now there is a volume strategy. And this volume strategy is attached to churn. Because after take-up, the key question is, how do you keep the client on your network? And FTTR is really a wonderful way to tie your customer. We're going to show you, if I don't talk too much, a video from one of our friends, an operator called Ziop in the island of Réunion, who apologized because they should have been with us today, but they couldn't join. So they provide us with a video that basically present their product. And what they did, actually, they're actually proposing the FTTR solution. And the business is not to create additional values through ARPU. But the take that they are, the guess or the rationale they are taking is that churn will collapse. They've been making it for nearly a year now. So basically bringing at a very low cost FTTR network within the premises of their clients. I talk about residential clients, I'm not talking here about SMEs. And it has a wonderful impact in terms of keeping the client. And for all of you who have been doing net present value calculation of your FTTH network, just play with the churn variable and see how it affects the thing. Believe me, the 200 euro or the 300 euros that you have to invest in order to deploy the FTTR is recovered fairly quickly. Obviously, FTTR is not the only solution. There are others. But we clearly have this in mind that this solution bring not only additional bandwidth, quality of service, low latency, and there is a business model behind that. This is something that is fairly new to us. As I was saying, these solutions are not only some Gulf area or Asia-Pacific thing. We were mentioning Ziop, which is an operator in the French overseas territory of Réunion. Mobistar has launched its FTTR solution last January. Vodafone has launched it in Portugal, and the Group Orange, via its subsidiary Euskaltel, has launched it in Spain. These are kind of my perspective on Vodafone and Euskaltel. These are really kind of testing, real life testing that they are doing. And then you have even very small operator like Vialis, which is a very small operator in France, covering 1 or 2 cities, that has launched it as well. So this home broadband solution, once you have connected with the home, with the fiber networks, how do you create more value out of it? Home broadband is really the key. FTTR, from our perspective, is one of the solutions. Obviously, in our countries, covering all the buildings that have already been built is complicated. Entering the home, I don't minimize the difficulties to build it. In new buildings, there should be some kind of regulation. I mean, in some countries already done in order to fiberize rather than using copper network. There is also a question, we were talking about SMEs. These solutions have their SME equivalent, POL, passive optical line solution, which is actually FTTR for smaller enterprise. These elements work as well. I'm looking at the time. Any question, any reaction? Usually FTTR create reaction. Usually people say, this is nonsense. Do we have a mic, please?
I think it's mostly nonsense. Last time I spoke to any of the FTTR vendors, they couldn't support open access for a start. There's also, how shall I put this delicately, geopolitical risk. And I also think that a lot of this really comes down to differences in approach to spectrum policy between bits of Asia and Europe, and particularly the 6 gigahertz band. And so there are heavy constraints on the ability of Wi-Fi to do effective meshes in places like China.
Meshes is an issue, agree, but which basically bring more water to the FTTR solution. And actually, I like your comment about the geopolitical issue. Talking with Telefonica, do you know that? So Telefonica has launched its FTTR solution. It's a homemade solution. They are not buying it from some Chinese telecom equipment manufacturer. They have developed their in-house solution, which for me was very surprising, but it's actually a way to address that. Wi-Fi 7 for FTTR is sufficient in order to provide a gigabit, because basically at the end, you understood the thing. In every room you have a fiber with a slave unit that basically create a small Wi-Fi cell that is covering perfectly the room where it is. So that's multiple Wi-Fi cells actually that are created. Wi-Fi 7 is sufficient. So we don't have the issue like for the Wi-Fi 8 with the spectrum question.
And the open access?
I didn't get the question.
When I've spoken to FTTR vendors,
yes,
they couldn't support wholesale or open access models because it ties together the optical and the IP layer.
To be honest, I have no answer to that. There is a report that IDATE has produced on the topic. This is a free report that we have launched for the FTTH Council. So you will get back to all the things that I have talked today. Happy to share with you and happy to discuss. Are there any questions left? Maybe we still have just the 5 minutes to look at the very interesting video that ZIOP has provided to us, where they actually explained their approach to FTTR. Would it be possible to launch the video, please? Thank you.
I'm Emmanuel André, CEO of ZIOP. ZIOP is an operator located in Réunion Island in the Indian Ocean. Réunion Island is one of the most connected districts in France. More than 95% of the households are already connected to fiber. At ZIOP, we believe in innovation, useful innovation. And since the beginning of our history, we had been launching so many innovations. Today, we are going to the next level of connectivity with the fiber to the room technology. As digital habits and technology and devices evolve, operators are facing a rise in complaints about Wi-Fi coverage. In fact, 60% of the complaints of the technical issues that are coming into the call centers are related to Wi-Fi coverage indoor. Thick cemented walls, multiple floors, and so on and so forth. So many hurdles that today prevent users from a very high-end connectivity. That's why we decided to go for the fiber to the room technology, a best-in-class technology that uses Wi-Fi, of course, but that relies mainly on fiber deployed within the household or the company. But what is the FTTR technology, fiber to the room technology?
Obviously there is some
It's a
issue
cutting edge, invisible, and at the same time powerful connectivity that eliminates all those issues once for all. And what about ZIOP and FTTR? Our innovation relies on a tailor-made solution that we've been deploying for the last year. First, a patented optical fiber connectivity. Two, a full network of box and mini boxes, kind of routers that allows us to offer a 360-degree coverage within the household. Three, up to 2 gigabytes bandwidth all across the household without any hurdles, without any loss. This ultra-fast speed coverage allows twice as more devices to be connected to the FTTR network. Just like Reunion Island, just like ZIOP, our model for FTTR is original. We've granted all our customers with a FTTR-ready box, and now for the last year, all new customers and as well customer in base had the choice to go to this FTTR-ready box. And then we've built up a customized installation able to cater for all the kind of needs, from the very specific connectivity to the wide house.
Okay. I think we got the message. We're really sorry for this little technical issue. I think the key message from ZIOP is actually this churn effect. The fact is what they have declared after 1 year of launch is that they have seen the customer who have accepted those FTTR solutions to have an increased satisfaction with the product, and hence a much lower willingness to unswitch and move to Orange, which is obviously their main competitors on the island. So we are exactly in time. Thank you very much for joining us today. We'll be happy to carry on the discussion with any of you. I hope to see you next year at the next FTTH conference in London. Thank you very much.